Welcome to this explainer. Look, if you've ever stared down at a chessboard and just felt totally overwhelmed by the sheer number of possibilities, trust me, you are not alone. It is so easy to view chess as this chaotic mystery. A game of infinite, swirling variations where only absolute geniuses survive. But today, we are going to completely flip that perspective. We're going to break the game down into a highly structured three-part journey. By the end of this explainer, we're going to use the meta rule of three to give you a clear, chronological, cognitive roadmap to truly master the board.
Okay, let's dive into this. Have you ever played a game where you felt great for the first 10 moves and then suddenly your position completely falls apart? Why do so many amateur games completely collapse in the middle? Well, the answer is actually pretty simple. Players lack a structured framework across the different phases of the game. They play move to move instead of phase to phase.
Here is our cognitive roadmap for today. We'll look chronologically at Phase 1, the opening, Phase 2, the middle game, Phase 3, the end game, and finally, mastering your chess training.
Phase 1, the opening.
Think of this first phase using an architectural metaphor. You aren't trying to build the roof yet. You're literally just pouring the concrete foundation. Our source material divides the opening into 3 foundational chapters to explain this. First up, Chapter 1, Control the Center. You absolutely want to focus on occupying those central squares with your pawns to restrict your opponent's mobility and make your own piece maneuvering so much easier later on. Then, Chapter 2, Develop Pieces. You've got to prioritize bringing your knights and bishops into play early. And a huge rule of thumb here, try not to move the same piece twice in the opening if you can help it. Your goal is to establish a cohesive plan that eventually connects your rooks. Finally, Chapter 3 is King Safety. You need to identify the optimal timing to castle. Castling's great because it tucks your king away from all that central tension and secures him safely behind a healthy pawn shield.
So the crucial point is that opening training isn't about blind memorization. Far too many players just try to memorize deep lines of theory by rote memory, which is a trap. Instead, you need to deeply understand the strategic intent, the actual why, behind every single opening sequence. Because if you know why a move controls the center or develops a piece, you just won't panic when your opponent plays something unexpected.
To practically train for this, the data suggests building a solid opening repertoire. Pick lines you play consistently that match your strategic style, whether that's highly aggressive or super solid. Then, use tools like Chessable that utilize spaced repetition. Spaced repetition essentially tests you at specific intervals to permanently lock in your understanding of those lines.
Phase 2, the middle game.
All right, so once your foundation is poured and the board is fully developed, things heat up. This is where the game turns into a tense, tactical battlefield. The middle game breaks down into 3 distinct chapters. Chapter 4 is Stop Their Plan. So it's not just about what you want to do, it is heavily about anticipating their threats. Then Chapter 5, Positional Advantage. Here you improve piece coordination for long-term structural benefits. Think about identifying and exploiting weak enemy squares, establishing outposts for your knights, and recognizing bad bishop scenarios. And then we have Chapter 6, Spot Tactics. This is the art of seeing short-term combinations. You are actively scanning the board for patterns, things like pins, skewers, forks, and discovered attacks to win material.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is this vital, high-level defensive concept from Chapter 4 called prophylaxis. This is the skill of anticipating your opponent's threats before they even manifest. You achieve this by building one very simple habit. Before you even think about your own move, you must constantly ask yourself, what does my opponent want? So how do you actually train for this battlefield? The sources highlight 3 actionable methods. First, practice tactical motifs using the woodpecker method. This involves solving sets of puzzles repeatedly to dramatically increase your pattern recognition speed. Second, conduct an honest post-game review to uncover recurring tactical oversights. You really have to figure out why you lose. Finally, do blindfold and mind mirage exercises. This essentially trains your visualization skills, allowing you to calculate much deeper lines without physically needing to see the board.
Phase 3, the end game. If the middle game was a battlefield, the end game is literally an exercise in precision surgery. The board is stripped of all that noise, and every single move matters immensely. Our final 3 chapters outline this endgame strategy. Chapter 7 is King Activity. Now, unlike the opening where your king hides, you really have to flip your understanding here. The king is an active attacking piece. Use it to support pawn pushes and create mating threats. Next is Chapter 8, Solid Pawn Structure. You need to master pawn breakthroughs to create passed pawns, all while avoiding creating permanent weaknesses in your own structure.
And lastly, Chapter 9 is the rook on the 2nd or 7th rank. Use these specific ranks to ruthlessly restrict the enemy king and completely cut off their pieces. To survive the endgame, you simply have to know your technical jargon. A perfect example of this is the Lucena position. This is a foundational endgame technique where you use your rook to basically build a bridge, shielding your king from checks so you can successfully promote your pawn. Grasping the exact strategic requirements of basic setups, like the Lucena, is absolutely critical to successfully close out a match when you only have a slight advantage.
And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer devastating power of Chapter 9's principle, the number 7. Placing your rook on the 7th rank, or the 2nd rank if you happen to be playing black, is hands down one of the most powerful restricting tools in all of chess. It acts like a laser beam cutting across the board, completely paralyzing your opponent's pawns and keeping their king totally trapped on the back row. When it comes to training for the endgame, keep the number 100 in mind, specifically the 100 endgames you must know puzzle concept. The main goal here is to focus on solving endgame puzzles by applying classic theories directly to practical, actual board scenarios. Your endgame training focus needs to be incredibly precise because, let's face it, technical mistakes here are completely fatal. You just cannot recover. You must study basic endgames like king and pawn versus king, and of course the Philidor and Lucena positions. Furthermore, you should meticulously bookmark and analyze every single endgame loss you experience in your matches. Reviewing these ensures you never, ever repeat the same error twice.
Let's move to mastering your chess training and see how this builds a cohesive mastery of the entire game.
By combining spaced repetition for your openings, the woodpecker method for your middle game tactics, and meticulous post-game analysis for your endgame technique, you create a truly cohesive mastery of the entire board. Which leaves us with one final, pretty exciting thought. If you stop blindly memorizing variations and start truly understanding the why behind the opening, the middle game, and the endgame, how high can your rating actually climb? I challenge you to apply this chronological 3-part framework to your very next match. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and good luck out there on the board.